At this rate, at our next Male Perspective Conference, we'll have 4 women in the room. I'm just kidding. Mr. I have an addiction, but I don't want to work on it. You've heard me say it before, but I can't emphasize. With the internet, porn is rampant. Porn is all over the place. Porn is easy. You can do it in your room. Nobody knows. It's a victimless act. So they say.
Yeah.
But as they consume it, it's an appetite, again, as we talked about earlier, that only gets stronger. I shared in our first meeting that porn causes men to form composites of the women they view. So when they watch a woman, it's almost like a tattoo that's burned, only not on their skin, it's on their mind. So every time they consume porn, they have images. So it's the breasts of one woman and the legs of another woman, and it's the thighs of another woman and the arms and the fingers of another woman. And they form this composite picture, and then they ask their wives to compete with that. A woman will call in and she'll say, we've been married 3 years and my husband's sex drive is totally dropped. You know what one of the first questions they ask him? They ask her, do you think he's on porn? Because he's getting his release somewhere. He's not going without the release. Remember the principle, men never do without anything. They simply find alternative places of getting what they want. You don't want to marry Mr. Addiction. If you stumble across some stuff that makes you uncomfortable, if you bring it up to him and he doesn't want to address it, but you're scared to lose him, you ought to be scared to keep him. You ought to be scared that he's the father, he could be the father of your children. They did studies, you know I do lots of research. They did studies, and oftentimes people who murdered or committed some of the most heinous crimes, it started out with some sort of pornography, and then it just kept getting more brazen and more aberrant, and it just kept getting worse and worse and worse and worse and worse, and it ultimately expressed itself in someone who's a manslaughter, or someone who slices up people, or does some of the most perverse acts. But when they talk to them, what was the origin of this? And they'll say something like, when I was 6, I stumbled across a Playboy magazine, or I got on the web, or I started going to topless bars or whatever, and it just kept growing and growing and getting more perverse and growing and growing and growing. We talked about porn, but if it's gambling, if it's drugs, you have to be real careful. And many of these situations are addictions that take a while to unwind yourself from. Don't say, well, okay, I found out he's got this addiction, thank God, now he's going to change and we can still get married in 2 weeks. I put the down payment on. We got the hall, the invitations went out. You better send out another set of invitations, inviting them to your celebration party that you ain't going to be married to a sex addict.